If you had one word to describe Brazil, what would it be?
Oh, that's too tough. I don't have one word to
You don't
describe.
have one word?
No, I don't have one word to describe Brazil. It's too complex.
It's too complex.
Yes, maybe I have this expression. It's
Okay.
too complex.
Too complex. Well, that's the word. 2 words then.
Yeah, 2 words. I worked with TV for several years. I did some soap operas and this kind of stuff.
Really?
So,
Okay, well, good.
camera is not a mystery to me.
Awesome.
But it doesn't mean that I like it.
Your eyes don't shine, not like they used to shine, and the thrill is gone when your lips meet mine.
Alright, so my name is Gustavo Melo Cerqueira. I'm from Brazil. More specifically, I'm from Salvador, which is a city in the northeast of Brazil. Yes, it was 2011 was when I came to do the master's program here in the African Diaspora Studies program. Yeah. It's been pretty tough, but it's been good. So it's much better than in 2011 right now. So the language is not that big challenge. It's still a challenge, but it's not the same as in 2011. And I can understand better the city. I can move my body more relaxing in the city. So in 2011, I had the impression that everybody here in Austin walked in lines, that nobody made any kind of different gesture or move because maybe somebody could come and cut off your arm. Now I can go to the city and see, and I have the impression that people swing.
They move.
Yeah, they swing. And I said, okay, now if I can see this now, it means that maybe I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable. I went to college in 1993.
1993.
I went to the law school and I graduated in 1998. Yeah, since that time I began to work with theater. I graduated in law and then I began to work with theater. And I worked with theater until before coming here.
Really?
So I still work with theater, but differently because here I had less time. So here I do much more experimental solo works rather than doing theater with a company or whatever. I'm gonna make it a short story.
Okay.
But anyways, I did theater before going to college. I did a little bit of theater in high school, and it was an amazing experience to me. So when I was to law school, I had the feeling that law could make some deep social change, and I still believe that law can do that. But I could feel that I was not the person to be there doing law in the sense of making law to do social change.
Very true.
I thought there was a bunch of things that I could not agree. So I thought that, and I think that law is a little bit slow. And I had the impression that the human heart was not that slow. I was wrong, but that's what I was thinking about. So I think that in my case, I would be more useful to society if I could touch people's hearts and make them change individually, collectively, in groups, and then the law should follow those people instead of making the opposite. So I decided to do theater, also thinking about social change. Some people call that avant-garde or whatever. So I'm not always agree with those terms, but we could say that people become aware that they are not satisfied with something, and they find ways to express that. If we pay attention to that, we stop repeating the very old politics, and we begin to understand that there is something else. And if we can embrace and engage with that, that can be really transformative. To the point, it needs to change again. And we need to be like, okay, it was working until this point, but now we are aware that things are different again. So we need to change again. But it's really hard to make people understand this.
Yeah.
Well, it's really complex and it depends a lot. That's why I was kind of localizing my experience in Brazil in terms of the city where I was born. It's not the city
Salvador.
I lived. Yeah, Salvador. It's not the city I lived for the whole life, but it was the city I lived most of my life. So, and where I did go to college, when I began to do theater, everything was in Salvador, and it's the blackest city in Brazil. So it's the highest percentage of black people in Brazil in a single city. It's the city of Salvador. Some people also say that Salvador is the second blackest city in terms of number of black people in the world.
In the world.
So after Lagos in Nigeria, you need to go to Salvador, and then you go back to Africa to count cities. So the second place is about Salvador. And at the same time, you see lots of racial inequality in that city. So it's a city, it's a violent city. I lived in a pretty violent neighborhood as well. And it's a city that requires you to be smart, to move your body in a way that you can be invisible sometimes, and sometimes you need to be hyper visible to make things stop. So, but it's a tough city in terms of you don't know how to deal with the so-called criminals, and I say so-called criminals because who is the criminal, who is not, is very, very relative, and how to deal with the police at the same time. So it was at the same time, it was brilliant to live in that city. It's a city very chaotic, and that's what makes it so special. So everybody that goes there gets a little bit confused, not understanding what's really happening, and they discover a lot about themselves in that moment.
And your family? How did it?
Well, my family is okay. I lived with my parents for most of my life. Yeah, most of my life. And then when I moved to Rio, I just left my parents' house when I moved to Rio de Janeiro, when I was 25 years old. Before that, I was still living with them. So I graduated in law school and I began to do theater. So all those moments I was with my parents. It was not easy in certain moments, especially when I decided that I would not be a lawyer because I wanted to be an actor. So it was pretty tough.
Be a fly on the wall in that conversation.
Yeah, so that was the moment that I began to pack my stuff and said, I need to leave this out. It's not going to work to be here anymore. And then I had the opportunity to go to Rio de Janeiro to work in a soap opera. They invited me to do that. I said, okay, that's the chance I have to get out of Salvador for a bit. And then I ended up spending 10 years in Rio. And then I came to Austin, so I keep traveling and doing this kind of thing. But yeah, the life with my parents was pretty cool. It was not easy. I'm not going to tell you details about domestic issues. But anyways, we did the best we could. Yeah, actually I worked in several soap operas, but the first one was Um Anjo Caiu do Céu, which means an angel has fallen from the sky, from heaven, something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
But what people tell about is that the Brazilian soap operas are the best soap operas in the world.
Really?
Yeah. So they export a lot for several countries. So sometimes people from Angola, they meet me in Brazil and say, hey, you're the guy in that soap opera, because they saw one of the soap operas that went to Angola, and they go through to Europe, France. It's pretty much a school of how to make soap opera in a sense. It became like that. In the same way that you have Hollywood and cinema here in US as this media that makes people converge in a kind of a national unity or something like that. That's soap opera in Brazil. That's the role of soap opera in Brazil. Everybody watches soap opera and talks about soap opera. People who hate soap opera talk about soap opera just to say that they hate. So it's pretty much about watching those representations. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that we have a talent for melodramatic. For being melodramatic, we are all Latinos, and we are very, very. I think that we are very baroque. Is that the right expression?
Yeah, I think I can understand.
Very baroque in the sense that our humanity is not easy, and our existence is not easy, and we suffer, and we are Catholics, and we blame ourselves, and we need to punish ourselves, and we don't want to do that, but we have the desire to do that, but we should not do that because it's wrong. So having all those conflicts makes existence much more interesting for some of us. It's not that pragmatic representation that you say, I need to work, I'm going to earn my money, I'm going to pray for God, I'm going to give some money to the church, I'm going to go back and have my barbecue with my neighbors. And you're like, really? That's all?
That's it.
That for us it's not enough. We need all those waves of suffering. It's very romantic, in a sense. And it's not only about Latinos only, but I think that Latinos preserved that much more. So if you go to Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, who is an English guy, and you read the text, it's all about that. All about that. If you get all those those speeches this size, you get the first two sentences, the last two sentences, you have the whole idea. But then all this is about all the different thoughts and sufferings and things so that you get to the conclusion. That's what gives kind of a romantic existence. So I think it's about that. Yeah, it can be seen as a stereotype, or it can be seen as one of the qualities. It will become a stereotype if you see that as the only quality. But that's why I said Brazil is complex, or too complex, to avoid having one word that will become the stereotype. And in the same way that when I make that comparison with Shakespeare, which is in England, it is exactly to show you that it's not only about Latinos there. But certain cultures, they travel in a totally different direction. So we decided to explore this a little bit more. We're not only this, but that representation, that kind of representation is a kind of representation that we like to explore, at least when we want to watch a soap opera and have fun. Well, I think that it is pretty related. There is something that you said. One is about the subjects that we treat in some of those representations. So when we talk about violence and this and that, which is one thing, and the other thing is about that melodramatic stuff that we're talking about that might have some relation with the family structure or the ways in which we live our lives. But I think that it's much more with the ways we live our lives socially rather than the family unity. Do you know what I mean? So the family unities, they are pretty different from one another. They are not quite the same. They have some similar characteristics, but they're very different. But when you go to the social, then you need to have kind of some common signs and values and words so that you can communicate and participate in the social. So I think that's why I think that some churches grow very fast. So the Catholicism was something very, very strong, but now it's not anymore. So the Neo-Pentecostals are the strong stuff right now with a different kind of rituals. But even being Neo-Pentecostals, the kind of rituals they have are very, very related to a bunch of things. So they transform their bodies, they go to the floor and they dance and they twist. It's completely crazy as well. But with all due respect when I say that it's completely crazy. But I think that it has to do really with this societal, with this how can we socially share something. It's because I have the sensation that family ties in Brazil, for instance, and I'm talking from a particular perspective of a poor guy or a lower middle class guy born and raised in the blackest city of Brazil. So I'm not talking about the whole Brazil.
Right.
So from my perspective, the family ties go beyond your household. The life you have with your father and mother and brother, and I have an older brother. So it's fundamental for sure.
Okay.
It's fundamental to your character and everything. When I just say it's fundamental, I'm not saying that it should be the most important thing in your life. I'm saying that it really marks you very deeply. But I know that in my life there was a moment that I just began to demolish all my values and everything, and I did that because I wanted to do. It was very risky, but I did. And I decided to do that just to rebuild some things differently. And I could see that lots of the things I had were not exactly from my household. They were beyond that. They were the kind of relationship that I was building in my work, the relationship that I built in college with people in law school. They are still my family nowadays, part of my extended family. So you don't tell anybody, but I'm a 40 years old guy. So I graduated with 24. So it's 16 years. And we still have each other as brothers and sisters. Not the whole college, but a particular group who worked with gratuitos, legal assistants, and the poor people and all that stuff. We really treat each other as brothers and sisters, to the point that we don't talk to each other for years sometimes, because we also have fights as brothers and sisters.
Right.
You know what I mean? So if I go to theater, it's the same. The people I worked for 2 years in Brazil are still pretty much my family. The other that I worked for 7, 8 years in a particular group that I was showing that presentation, in a particular group, they are my family. The family I have in religion, I'm part of Candomblé, which is an Afro-Brazilian religion. Those are my family. So the values I have in my social life that can go to those melodramatic representations and this and that, my household family is just one part of this. And I cannot say it's the central one. I cannot say it's the central one. In the social life, when we are talking about the social or the existential issues you have, you're going to learn a lot from the people you're going to meet on the streets, even those who want to beat you up. You know, those are the people who are going to teach about yourself. There are some aspects of yourself that you cannot really express or expand in your family, and it's better this way for the safety of everybody. But you can do in the streets, and that's when you get to know and say, I'm capable of doing this. Shit.